You already know the monster, the Antichrist, the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, the number 666 burned into the whole world's imagination. For 2,000 years, when people picture the end, they picture it rising from the sea and spend their lives watching the water. Then you actually read the chapter. Halfway through Revelation 13, after the famous sea monster, a second beast shows up that almost nobody talks about. It does not rise from the sea. It comes up quietly out of the solid ground under your feet. It has 2 little horns, like a lamb, a lamb. In Revelation, there is only one lamb, and that lamb is Jesus. So this thing crawls out of the ground wearing the costume of the holiest image in the book, and then it opens its mouth and out comes the voice of the dragon. But here is what should stop you cold. This quiet second beast, the one nobody watches for, runs everything that comes next. The miracles, the statue that talks and kills, the mark you cannot buy or sell without. The number. The first beast gets the worship. The second beast makes it happen. It was built from the horns down, to be mistaken for something safe. So, the real question of Revelation 13 was never the beast from the sea. It is what the beast from the earth is, why it wears the face of a lamb, and how you would ever tell in time. Let's get into it. To understand the beast from the earth, you have to see it standing next to the beast it works for, because Revelation 13 is a chapter with 2 monsters in it, and the whole trick of the chapter is that people only ever remember one of them. The chapter opens with the one everybody knows. A beast comes up out of the sea. It has 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its horns are 10 crowns, and on its heads are blasphemous names. It looks like a leopard, with the feet of a bear and the mouth of a lion, a nightmare stitched together out of the most dangerous predators a person in that world could imagine. And a dragon, who the chapter before has already told us, is the ancient serpent, the devil himself, hands this sea beast his own power and his throne and enormous authority. One of the beast's heads looks like it had been wounded to death, and then the deadly wound was healed, and the whole earth marvels and follows after it. People worship the dragon for giving such power to the beast, and they worship the beast, and they say the line that sounds like a hymn and is actually surrender. Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it? That is the beast that gets all the attention. That is the one on every prophecy chart, in every movie, behind every whispered theory about who the Antichrist really is. And the text gives it real weight. It is allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. It is given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation. For a set period, the text counts as 42 months. Everyone whose name is not written in the Lamb's Book of Life ends up worshipping it. So this is not a small enemy. This is the great counterfeit king, the political and military monster that the whole world bows to. But then the chapter does something almost nobody notices, because by this point in the reading their attention is spent. It changes monsters. The sea beast finishes its introduction, and John says, "And then I saw another beast." Another one. A second creature, rising up, and this time not out of the churning sea, but out of the earth, out of the dry land. And everything about how it is described is designed to be a contrast with the first one. The sea beast was loud, enormous, covered in heads and horns and crowns and blasphemies, impossible to miss. This second beast has 2 horns, just 2, and they are not the horns of a predator. The text says they were like a lamb. Feel how strange that is for a second. You have just met a 7-headed horror that the entire planet is terrified of and in love with at the same time. And the next thing to come on stage is a small 2-horned animal that looks, of all things, like a lamb. If you were casting the villains of the apocalypse, you would never give the second slot to something that looks harmless. And that is exactly the point. That is the warning built into the picture. Because in the book of Revelation, the lamb is not a random farm animal. The lamb is the single most loaded image in the entire book. Go back a few chapters to Revelation 5, and you find the moment the lamb enters the story. John is weeping because no one is found worthy to open the scroll of God, And one of the elders tells him to stop crying because the Lion of the tribe of Judah has triumphed. And John turns to look for a lion, and what he sees instead, standing at the center of the throne of God, is a lamb, looking as if it had been slain. That lamb is Jesus. Crucified, risen, standing at the middle of heaven, and the whole of creation falls down and sings to him, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain." For the rest of the book, all the way to the end, the Lamb is the hero. The Lamb opens the seals. The Lamb wages war and wins. The Lamb has a book of life with names in it. The Lamb marries the holy city. When Revelation says Lamb, it means the crucified and living Christ, and nothing else. So now go back to chapter 13 and look at the second beast again, and you will feel the horror of the design. This creature comes up out of the earth, wearing 2 horns like a lamb. It has deliberately put on the appearance of the lamb. It is doing an impression of Jesus. Of all the shapes a servant of the dragon could have taken, it took the shape of the gentlest, holiest, most trustworthy thing in the book. It walks out looking like the crucified Christ, and that costume is the first move in everything it is about to do, because a monster that looks like a monster puts you on your guard, and a monster that looks like a lamb walks right past it. And then comes the second half of the verse, the half that rips the costume open. It had 2 horns like a lamb, John says, and it spoke like a dragon. The look is a lamb. The voice is the dragon, the same dragon who handed the first beast its throne, the ancient serpent from the garden. So you have a thing whose entire body is a lie and whose voice is the truth about what it is. Everything you can see says gentle. The moment it speaks, everything you can hear says serpent. And most people in the story never get past what they can see. They take one look at the horns, decide it is safe, and never stop to listen to the voice long enough to notice the hiss underneath the words. Which raises the question this whole video is going to chase down, coin by coin and verse by verse. What is this second beast actually for? Why does the apocalypse need a lamb-shaped lyre standing next to its great monster? Because it turns out this creature has a job, a very specific and very modern job. And once you understand what that job is, you will start seeing this beast everywhere. And the version of Revelation you were handed, the one that is all about a single scary man rising from the sea, is not the full picture. Here is the job of the beast from the earth, stated plainly in the text. And it is not what you would expect from a monster. Its job is not to be worshipped. Its job is to make you worship something else. Read the verse that comes right after the lamb and the dragon. John says the second beast exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and it makes the earth and everyone living on it worship the first beast, the one whose deadly wound was healed. Look hard at the shape of that sentence. The second beast has real power, all the authority of the first beast, and it spends every bit of that power pointing away from itself. It builds no throne of its own. Every scrap of that power gets aimed away from itself, a machine for manufacturing worship and pointing all of it at the sea beast. It stands slightly off to the side, in the shadow of the bigger monster, and its entire purpose is to keep the crowd's eyes locked on the thing it serves. And that is the detail that tells you what this creature really is, because a power whose whole function is to point at another power and say worship that one has a name in the rest of the book. Later in Revelation, this second beast gets called something you have probably heard, without knowing where it comes from. 3 separate times, in chapters 16, 19, and 20, Revelation stops calling it the beast from the earth and starts calling it the false prophet. The dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. Those 3 named together over and over at the end of the book. The beast from the earth is the false prophet. Not a general, not a king, a prophet, a religious figure. The one whose job is to tell you who to bow to and to make the bowing feel holy. And once you see it as the false prophet, a pattern snaps into focus that runs underneath this entire chapter, and it is genuinely one of the eeriest things in the book. Look at who the 3 villains are. There is the dragon from chapter 12, who is Satan, and who has a throne and gives away authority, the way a father hands down a kingdom. There is the first beast from the sea, who receives that authority, who has a death wound that was healed and came back to life, and who the whole world worships. And there is this second beast, the false prophet, whose entire job is to direct worship toward the beast and to give life and breath to its image. A father who sends, a son who dies and lives again and is worshipped, and a third figure whose whole role is to point people to that son and fill his image with breath. If that structure sounds familiar, it is supposed to. Many readers across the centuries have noticed that these three form a kind of counterfeit of the Trinity. The dragon plays the role of the Father who sends. The sea beast plays a twisted Christ, complete with a parody of death and resurrection in that healed mortal wound. And the false prophet plays a dark mirror of the Holy Spirit, whose true work in the Bible is to point people to Jesus and to give life. The Spirit of God points to the real Son and breathes real life. This false prophet points to the false Son and breathes a false life into a dead image. The whole thing is a forgery of God, 3 persons deep, and the beast from the earth is standing in the slot where the Spirit should be. That is why it wears the lamb. A forgery has to resemble the real thing, or nobody would take it. Now, I want to be careful and honest with you here, the way this channel always tries to be, because this is exactly the kind of connection that is easy to oversell. Revelation never uses the word Trinity, and it never lines these 3 up and labels them a counterfeit in so many words. The counterfeit Trinity reading is an interpretation that Christian readers have drawn because the parallels are so tight. The sending, the death and return, the pointing, the giving of breath. I think it is a strong and old reading, and I am going to keep leaning on it, but I want you to hold it as a reading of the pattern, not a caption John writes underneath the picture. What John does say outright is the part that matters most, and it is chilling enough on its own. This second beast looks like the lamb, speaks like the dragon, and exists to turn the whole world's worship toward a lie. And here is why the lamb costume is not just clever, but necessary. And this is where the chapter stops being ancient and starts describing something you have watched happen. Raw force does not actually produce worship. The first beast has all the power in the world, armies, authority over every nation, the ability to make war and win. But power alone makes people afraid, and fear is not the same as devotion. You can terrify someone into obeying you. You cannot terrify them into loving you. To get genuine worship, adoration, the thing where people defend you and sing about you and want to be marked as yours, you need something power cannot supply. You need to look good. You need to look holy. You need to look like a lamb. And that is the exact commodity the second beast brings to the table. The first beast supplies the force. The second beast supplies the sacredness. It takes a naked, frightening power and it wraps it in the language of heaven until people do not just obey it, they adore it. So the beast from the earth is the propaganda arm of the apocalypse, the one that makes tyranny feel like church. But that raises the next question, and the answer sends us back through the whole Bible and out into the real streets of the first century. Why does one beast come up out of the sea and the other come up out of the earth? Those 2 directions are not random set dressing. In the world John was writing to, the sea and the land each carried a very specific meaning. And once you know what they meant, the 2 beasts stop being cosmic cartoons and turn into a razor-sharp portrait of exactly how power actually worked in the world of the people first reading this. And it is a lot closer to home than a monster in the ocean. The 2 beasts come from 2 different places on purpose, and to a first-century reader, those 2 places, the sea and the land, were about as far from neutral as words can get. Start with the sea, because the Bible has a long and uneasy relationship with it. In the ancient Hebrew imagination, the sea meant chaos. It was the dark, churning, uncontrollable deep that existed before God brought order in Genesis, the place where the waters had to be pushed back for dry land to appear. Out of that same chaotic sea, in the book of Daniel, 4 great beasts come up, one after another, and Daniel is told plainly that these beasts are kingdoms, empires, Gentile world powers rising up to devour the earth. So when Revelation shows a beast coming up out of the sea, a Jewish reader did not picture an aquarium. They felt an old dread. The sea beast is a world empire, rising out of the chaos of the nations, exactly like Daniel's monsters. It is foreign, it is vast, and it comes from across the water. And for the specific people John was writing to, 7 small churches in the Roman province of Asia, which is the west coast of what is now Turkey, the empire that came from across the sea was obvious. It was Rome. Rome ruled them from across the Mediterranean. Roman power arrived by ship. The emperor was 1,000 miles away over the water, and yet his authority sat on every one of their necks. So the beast from the sea, for its first readers, pointed at something obvious. It was the imperial machine, the throne of Caesar, the vast foreign power that had come up out of the sea of the nations and demanded to be treated as divine. The sea beast is the state, the empire, the boot. Now turn to the land, and the picture gets more intimate and more disturbing. The second beast does not come from across the sea. It comes up out of the earth, out of the local ground, the home soil. It does not arrive from far away like the foreign empire. It grows up native, out of your own land, among your own people. And in the first century province of Asia, there really was such a thing, sitting right there in every city, and it fits the beast from the earth so precisely that most scholars think it is exactly what John had in mind. It was the local machinery of emperor worship. Here is what that means, because this is the part that turns the whole chapter from a monster movie into something recognizable. Rome did not usually need to send soldiers to force the provinces to worship the emperor. It did not have to. Local elites did it for them, eagerly, because it was good for business and good for status. The cities of Asia competed for the honor of building temples to the emperor. Local priesthoods sprang up to run the imperial cult, to organize the festivals, to lead the sacrifices, to put on the spectacles where the whole town gathered to declare that Caesar was Lord and God. These were your own neighbors, not foreign occupiers, your local worthies, the respected men of your own city, wrapping the raw power of a distant empire in the robes of religion and making participation in it feel like civic pride and common sense. That is the beast from the earth, homegrown religious power that exists to make everyone worship the foreign power from the sea. And look how perfectly that lines up with everything the text already told us. The beast from the earth exercises the authority of the first beast, the way a local imperial priest wielded Rome's authority in a provincial town. It makes the people worship the first beast, the way the imperial cult existed precisely to direct worship towards Caesar. It comes from the land, not the sea, the way the cult was local, not foreign. And it wears the costume of religion, the lamb, because that is what a priesthood is, a religious face on a political reality. The two beasts are the two halves of how domination actually works in the real world. There is the hard power that comes from far away and rules by force. And there is the soft power, right next door, run by people you know, that makes you feel good about kneeling to it. And there may be an even older layer under this, buried in Jewish tradition, that makes the two directions land even harder. In some ancient Jewish writings, going back to the book of Job, and echoing through texts written around the time of Revelation, there were 2 primordial monsters God made at the beginning. One was Leviathan, the great twisting monster of the sea. The other was Behemoth, the huge beast of the dry land. The sea monster and the land monster, a matched pair, the 2 great creatures of the deep and of the earth. Several scholars have noticed that John's 2 beasts, one from the sea and one from the land, look like they are reaching back and picking up that ancient pair, Leviathan and Behemoth, and turning them loose at the end of history. The oldest monsters in the imagination of Israel, the sea beast and the earth beast, rising one more time. And here I owe you the honest line again, because it matters, that the first readers would have felt Rome and the local imperial cult under these 2 beasts is about as solid as this kind of reading gets, and most careful scholars land there. The Leviathan and Behemoth connection is more of an educated suggestion, a resonance some scholars argue for and others are cooler on, and I want you to hold it a little more loosely than the Rome reading. But whether or not John was thinking of Behemoth, the shape of what he built is unmistakable. 2 beasts, 2 directions, force and religion, the empire and the priesthood that sanctifies it. And the next thing the earth beast does, once it has the crowd's attention, is start performing miracles. Because a priesthood that wants to be believed needs more than robes. It needs signs. And the signs this beast performs are copied, almost move for move, from the greatest miracles in the Bible. Here is where the beast from the earth goes to work in the open, and the first thing it does is pull fire down out of the sky in front of everyone. And that particular miracle is a quotation, lifted straight out of the Old Testament. John says the second beast performs great signs, and he names the headline Act. It makes fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of everyone. Now, any first-century reader who knew their scriptures would have felt a jolt at that, because calling fire down from heaven is the signature miracle of the single greatest prophet in the Hebrew Bible. It is what Elijah did on Mount Carmel. Elijah stood in front of the whole nation against the hundreds of prophets of the false god Baal, and he said, "The God who answers by fire, he is God." And the prophets of Baal called on their God all day, and nothing happened. And then Elijah prayed, and fire fell from heaven and consumed his sacrifice, and the people fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, he is God." Fire from heaven is the miracle that proves in front of a crowd which God is real. So watch what the beast from the earth is doing. It is performing Elijah's miracle, beat for beat. It is staging the exact sign that in the mind of everyone watching means this is the true prophet of the true God. And there is a second layer to it that is even sharper, because 2 chapters earlier in Revelation itself, God's own 2 witnesses are given the power to breathe fire and to call down judgment during their ministry. So the false prophet is not only copying Elijah from the ancient past, it is copying the true prophets standing in its own book. This is a forgery holding up a perfect replica of the genuine article. The signs look right. The fire is real fire. To the eye, there is nothing to distinguish the counterfeit prophet from a real one, because it has studied the real ones and reproduced their miracles down to the flame. And by those signs, John says, it deceives. That is the word the text uses for what the miracles accomplish, not convinces, deceives. The fire is there to trick people, to build enough credibility that the crowd will do the next thing the beast tells them to do. And the next thing is where this gets truly strange. The false prophet, having dazzled everyone with fire, tells the people of the earth to build something. It orders them to make an image, a statue, of the first beast, the one that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. Go make a likeness of the monster, it says, and the deceived crowd obeys, and they raise up an image of the beast. And here is the detail that would have made a Jewish reader's blood run cold, and that echoes one of the most famous showdowns in the whole Old Testament. A ruler sets up a great image, and everyone is commanded to bow to it on pain of death. That is the book of Daniel, chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar builds an enormous golden statue on the plain of Dura and commands that when the music plays, everyone in the empire must fall down and worship it, and anyone who refuses will be thrown into a furnace of fire. 3 young Hebrew men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refuse to bow, and they are thrown into the flames for it. The image, the command to worship, the death sentence for those who will not, all of it is sitting right there in Daniel. And Revelation deliberately picks it back up. The beast from the earth is staging Nebuchadnezzar's golden image all over again, at the end of history, for the whole world. But the beast from the earth adds one horror that Nebuchadnezzar's statue never had. John says the false prophet is allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image can even speak and can cause everyone who refuses to worship it to be put to death. Read that slowly. The statue is given breath, the statue talks, and the statue kills. A dead thing, a manufactured idol of wood or stone or metal, is filled with breath until it seems alive, and then it uses that borrowed life to demand worship and to execute anyone who says no. And that word, breath, is the blackest joke in the whole passage, because giving breath to lifeless matter is something only God is supposed to be able to do. Go all the way back to the beginning of the Bible, to the making of the first human being, where God forms a body out of the dust of the ground and breathes into it the breath of life, and only then does the dust become a living soul. Breathing life into what was lifeless is the exact signature of the Creator. It is the thing that separates the living God from the dead idols the prophets mocked for centuries, the idols with mouths that cannot speak and eyes that cannot see. And here, at the end, the false prophet reaches into that divine act and produces a counterfeit of it. It breathes a false life into a false God and makes the mouth that could never speak start speaking, and what the idol says is, "Worship me or die." The beast from the earth is doing far more than performing miracles here. It is doing an impression of the Creator giving life and using it to run a death machine. So the beast from the earth deceives with signs, builds an image, gives it a voice, and turns refusal to worship into a capital crime. But how do you enforce that on an entire population, when you cannot possibly watch everyone at once? The beast has an answer, and it is the most famous and most misunderstood part of the whole chapter. It puts a mark on people, and the place it puts that mark, and the thing it locks behind it, tells you exactly what this creature has always really been after. Here is the mark of the beast, the thing that has terrified readers for 2,000 years and launched 1,000 wild theories. And the text is far more specific and far more pointed than the theories usually are. John says, "The beast from the earth causes everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead." Everyone, every rank, no exceptions. And then he says what the mark is for. No one can buy or sell unless they have the mark, which is the name of the beast, or the number of its name. So the mark does two things at once. It goes on the hand or the forehead, and it becomes the price of admission to the entire economy. Without it, you cannot trade, you cannot buy food, you cannot sell your work. You are locked out of ordinary life. The mark is where worship and survival get fused into a single stamp. Now, the right hand and the forehead. Those two locations are not chosen at random, and this is the part almost nobody is told. In the Bible, the hand and the forehead are already a matched pair, and they already mean something centuries before Revelation. Go back to the heart of the law of Moses, to the great command that faithful Jews recited every single day, the Shema. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart." And right after that command, God tells the people what to do with his words. "Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them be as frontlets between your eyes, on your forehead." The hand and the forehead were the two places where a faithful Israelite carried the sign that they belonged to God. Devout Jews took that literally. They wore small boxes called tefillin, phylacteries, containing those words of God, bound onto the hand and onto the forehead, exactly as the command said. The hand, because it stands for what you do, your actions, your work. The forehead, because it stands for what you think, your mind, your allegiance. To carry God's word on your hand, and your forehead was to say out loud and in public, "Everything I do and everything I believe belongs to the Lord." It was the badge of whose you were, and the beast from the earth takes that badge, that exact pair of locations, the hand and the forehead, and stamps its own mark there instead. It is a direct forgery of the sign of belonging to God. Where the faithful carried the name of the Lord, the deceived now carry the name of the beast, on the same hand, on the same forehead. And Revelation makes that contrast on purpose, because it has already shown you the real version. A few chapters earlier, God's own servants are sealed. An angel puts a seal on the foreheads of the people who belong to God, to mark them as his and to protect them. And later in the book, the followers of the Lamb are described as having the Lamb's name and the Father's name written on their foreheads. So the whole book is running two marks side by side. There is the seal of God on the forehead that marks you as belonging to the Lamb, and there is the mark of the beast on the forehead or the hand that marks you as belonging to the monster. Everyone in Revelation ends up wearing one mark or the other. There is no third option, no unmarked middle. You carry the name of the Lamb, or you carry the name of the beast. The mark of the beast is the counterfeit of the seal of God, and the entire drama of the book is the question of whose name is written on you. And Revelation does not leave that choice hanging in the air as if it were a small or neutral one. The chapter right after this, chapter 14, opens with the two marks set violently against each other. First, John sees the followers of the Lamb, a great crowd standing with him on Mount Zion, and they have his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads, the true seal, worn out in the open. And then an angel flies overhead with a warning spoken to the whole earth, and it is one of the most severe warnings in the entire Bible. Anyone who worships the beast and its image and takes its mark, the angel says, will drink the wine of the wrath of God. The book could not make the stakes any plainer. The stamp on the hand and the forehead is far more than an administrative detail about shopping. It is the visible sign of which side a person has chosen in the one conflict the whole book is about, and Revelation treats receiving it as close to the gravest thing a human being can do. Quick pause here, right at the heavy heart of this thing, because I want to say something to you directly. If you would rather actually understand what this book is doing, layer by layer, than nod along to a scary summary you half remember from somewhere, then take 1 second and subscribe. That is the entire reason this channel exists. Every week we take one passage people are sure they already know, or are frankly a little scared of, and we go back to the oldest words and read what is really on the page. Subscribe so the next one finds you, because in a few minutes I am going to show you what the number 666 actually meant to the people who first read it, and it is not the barcode or the microchip you have been told to fear. Alright. And the word John actually uses for the mark makes the first century meaning even sharper. The Greek word is charagma, and a charagma was an ordinary, well-known thing in the Roman world. Nothing futuristic about it at all. It was an official stamp, a seal, the kind of imperial mark that got pressed onto documents and coins to show they carried the authority of the emperor. It was the emperor's brand of ownership and approval. Roman coins themselves carried the emperor's image and his title, and those titles regularly claimed divine honors, Son of the Divine, Lord, and God. So to buy and sell in that economy, you were already handling metal stamped with the emperor's image and his blasphemous claims to divinity every single day. You could not participate in trade without, in a small way, passing the emperor's mark from hand to hand. So put the whole picture together, the way a first-century Christian in one of those 7 cities would have felt it, because for them this was not science fiction, it was Tuesday. To make a living, you often had to belong to a trade guild, and the guilds held feasts in honor of the gods and the emperor. To buy and sell in the public market, you handled coins stamped with Caesar's image and his claim to be divine. To be a citizen in good standing, you were expected to show up at the Imperial festivals, to burn a pinch of incense, to say the words, "Caesar is Lord." The pressure to worship the beast came in a far quieter form than a soldier at your door. It came as the daily grinding question of whether you could feed your family without going along with it. Take the mark, join the guild, handle the coin, say the words, and the market stays open to you. Refuse, and the gate closes. That is the beast from the earth doing its real work, and it does not need a furnace to do it. It just needs to control who gets to buy and sell. And that is what makes the mark so much heavier than the microchip theories give it credit for. The mark of the beast was never mainly about a piece of technology on your skin. It was about allegiance, sealed onto the 2 places that stand for what you do and what you think, and enforced through the one pressure almost nobody can hold out against forever, your own survival. Which brings us, finally, to the strangest and most argued over detail in the entire chapter. The name of the beast could be counted. It had a number. And John does something no other place in the Bible does. He stops, and he tells you to do the math, and he hands you the answer. 666. Let's find out what it actually meant. Here is the most famous number in the world, and the verse it comes from is doing something very deliberate and very much of its own time that almost nobody explains to you before they start scaring you with it. John writes, "This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Read what he actually says there, because two things in that sentence get skipped constantly. First, he does not present the number as a mystery to be feared. He presents it as a puzzle to be solved. Calculate it, he says. Reckon it. It is a riddle with an answer, aimed at people who have the wisdom to work it out. And second, he tells you what kind of answer to expect. It is the number of a man, not a barcode, not a computer, not a payment system. The number of a man, a specific human being, whose name, when you do the calculation, comes out to 666. To understand how a name becomes a number, you have to know one thing about the ancient world that we have completely lost. And once you know it, the whole riddle opens up. In Greek and in Hebrew, they did not have separate symbols for numbers the way we have our digits. They used the letters of the alphabet to also stand for numbers. The first letter was 1, the second letter was 2, and so on up through tens and hundreds, which means every single word and every name automatically had a numerical value. You just added up the letters. This practice had a name. In Greek, it was called isopsephia, and in Hebrew, gematria, and people genuinely used it. There is even a bit of graffiti dug up in the ruins of Pompeii, buried in 79, where some anonymous Roman wrote, "I love the girl whose number is 545. He did not want to write her name, so he wrote the sum of its letters and trusted that she and no one else would understand. So when John says, calculate the number of the beast, his first readers knew exactly what kind of game this was. Take a name, add up the value of its letters, and see if it lands on 666. And for centuries, people have tried the calculation on every villain they could think of, which is exactly why the number has been pinned on so many different people, popes and emperors and dictators and presidents, because if you are willing to bend the spelling and switch the language, you can torture almost any name into almost any number. But there is one candidate that fits with far less bending than the rest, one that the original readers were positioned to catch, and it points straight back at the world we have already been describing. Take the name of the Emperor Nero. His full title in the form the Eastern provinces used was Nero Caesar. Now write that title the way a Jewish reader in Asia would, in Hebrew letters, Neron Caesar. Add up the value of those Hebrew letters, one by one, and the total comes to exactly 666. Nero, the emperor who, according to Roman historians, turned Christians into human torches to light his gardens, who executed them in the arena, who became the very face of the empire as a monster devouring the followers of the Lamb. The first great persecutor of the church, the living embodiment of the beast from the sea, adds up letter by letter to the number of the beast. Many scholars think that is the solution John buried in the riddle, hidden just well enough that his own people could read it, and Rome could not obviously prosecute him for it. And here is the piece of evidence that makes this reading genuinely hard to wave away, because it comes from an ancient accident. Not every old copy of Revelation says 666. A few of the oldest manuscripts, including one of the earliest fragments we have, give the number as 616 instead. 616. For a long time, that looked like a simple copying mistake, and scholars mostly ignored it. But watch what happens when you go back to Nero. The Hebrew spelling Neron Caesar with the final N comes to 666. But there was also a shorter Latin form of the name, Nero Caesar, without that final N. Drop the N, and you drop exactly the value that separates 666 from 616. In other words, both versions of the number, the famous one and the strange variant, decode to the same man, depending only on which spelling of Nero you use. That kind of double fit does not happen by chance. It is one of the strongest signs in the whole book that the number was, from the start, a coded name, and that the name was Nero. And I have to be straight with you about what that does and does not prove, because this is exactly the point where this number gets abused, showing that 666 most likely encoded Nero does not hand anyone a decoder ring for spotting the beast in today's headlines. For centuries, confident people have run the calculation on whoever they already feared, a pope, a king, a president, and announced they had found the beast, and every one of them, so far, has been wrong. The text says the number is the number of a man, a name you could add up on your fingers, not a barcode hidden in a label or a chip waiting under your skin. The people who turn it into a gadget hunt are chasing the one thing John did not write. He wrote a name, and the wisest thing you can do with the riddle is refuse to pretend you have cracked a code the text never actually handed you. But even with a name attached, the number is doing something bigger than just pointing at one dead emperor, and this is the layer that keeps it alive for every generation. Think about what number 666 actually is. In the symbolism that runs all through Revelation, 7 is the number of completeness, of perfection, of God. God rests on the seventh day. There are 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 spirits before the throne. 7 is the number of the finished, the whole, the divine, and 6 is what falls short of 7. 6 is one less than perfect every single time, and the beast's number is 3 sixes, not 1. 6, 6, 6. It is falling short of God, tripled. It is a thing that reaches for the completeness of 7, that wants to be worshipped as God, and lands again and again and again on 6, on not quite, on the number of a man playing God and never once getting there. That is the number of the beast, not a serial code from the future, but the oldest failure there is, dressed up as a crown. So the number is a man, and it is Nero, and it is also every ruler in every age who reaches for the worship that belongs to God and comes up one short. And that double meaning, one specific emperor and a pattern that repeats forever, is exactly the fault line that the oldest and biggest argument about this whole chapter runs along. Because for 2,000 years, readers have split into camps over one question. Was the beast from the earth a thing of John's own century, already come and gone? Or is it still out there, ahead of us, waiting? And the honest answer is more interesting and more unsettling than either side usually admits. For as long as people have read Revelation 13, they have disagreed about what the beast from the earth actually is. And there are, roughly, 4 honest ways to answer, and I am going to lay them out fairly, because you deserve to see the options instead of being handed one and told it is settled. The first reading keeps it in John's own century. On this view, everything we have already traced is the whole answer. The beast from the sea is Imperial Rome. The beast from the earth is the local imperial cult that enforced emperor worship across the province of Asia. The image is the emperor's statue. The mark is the daily economic pressure to conform, and the number is Nero. It all happened. John was writing to real churches under real persecution, in code, to strengthen them to hold out against a specific empire. This is the reading most anchored in history, and it is almost certainly the first thing John's own audience heard. On its own terms, it holds together, and it is largely persuasive. The second reading says the beast is not one empire, but a pattern that recurs through all of history. On this view, John was shown a template, and Rome was only the first time it got filled in. The beast from the earth is any religious or ideological power in any century that sanctifies a brutal state and dresses domination in the robes of the sacred. On this reading, you can watch the same beast come up out of the earth again and again. Wherever a priesthood or a propaganda machine puts a holy face on raw power and tells people that kneeling to it is their duty, the costume changes. The lamb horns and the dragon voice stay the same. This is the reading that treats the chapter as a mirror history keeps holding back up. The third reading points forward, to the end. On this view, the deepest fulfillment of the beast from the earth is still ahead of us, a coming figure, the false prophet, who will arise alongside a final world ruler, perform real deceptive signs, enforce a real global system of worship, and control who can buy and sell through a mark nobody can fake. On this reading, Rome and every tyrant since were previews, rehearsals, and the true performance is yet to come. This is the reading behind most of what you have heard about the end times. And while it is easy to caricature, at its serious best it takes with full weight the fact that John clearly believed he was describing the climax of history, not just a local political squabble. And the fourth reading refuses to let you stand outside the picture as a spectator to any of it. It takes the whole thing and turns it inward and asks not when the beast comes, but how it works on a human heart in any age, including this afternoon. On this reading, the beast from the earth is the permanent human machinery of deception, the way power in every era gets you to worship it not by force, but by wearing something you already trust. It is the voice that comes at you, looking like a lamb, using words you associate with everything good and safe and holy, and asks you to bow to something you would never have bowed to if it had shown up as a dragon. This reading treats the chapter as less a calendar than a test of discernment, one you are taking constantly. Now, I am not going to pretend to settle for you which of those four is the true one, because honestly the text has fed all four for 2,000 years and the strongest readers have often held more than one at once. But I want to pull the fourth one in close, because it is the one the chapter itself keeps forcing on you, no matter which of the others you land on. Go back to the single image the whole thing is built on. 2 horns like a lamb, and a voice like a dragon. That image is a warning about a specific kind of danger, and it is not the danger most people spend their lives braced for. Because we are all watching the sea. We are all scanning the horizon for the obvious monster, the loud one, the 7-headed thing everyone agrees is evil. That one, honestly, is the easy one to resist, because it looks like exactly what it is. The beast the Bible is more worried about is the one that comes up quietly out of your own ground, out of the familiar and the trusted and the respectable, wearing the face of the very thing you love most. It does not announce itself as a dragon. It looks like a lamb. It uses the language of faith, of goodness, of safety, of belonging, and it asks you for the one thing that only ever belongs to God, your worship, your allegiance, the mark on your hand and your forehead that says whose you are. The whole point of the lamb costume is that you will hand that over without ever feeling the danger, because it never looked dangerous. It looked like home. And that is why John gives you the one tool that actually works against it, quietly, inside the description itself. You cannot tell this beast by its appearance, because its appearance is a lie, a perfect lamb. You can only tell it by its voice, by what it actually says when it opens its mouth, and what it actually asks you to do. The look will always be gentle. The test is always the voice. Stop watching the horns. The text is telling you, and start listening to the words, because the horns are a costume and the words are the truth, and the difference between the lamb and the thing that only looks like the lamb was never in the face. It was always in what came out of the mouth. We started with a monster everybody watches for, the 7-headed beast out of the sea, the Antichrist, the number burned into the whole world's imagination. And the version most people carry is that Revelation 13 is a chapter about that one great enemy rising out of the water at the end of the world. But when you actually slow down and read it, the chapter quietly changes monsters halfway through and hands you a second one that is far stranger and far closer than the first. The lamb costume told us how it works, by looking like the holiest thing in the book, so you would never suspect it. The name false prophet told us what it is, the religious face that turns raw power into worship. The sea and the land told us where the 2 halves of domination come from, the far-off empire and the homegrown priesthood that blesses it. The fire and the breathing statue told us it forges the miracles of the true God down to the flame. The mark on the hand and forehead told us what it is really after, your allegiance, sealed onto the places that stand for what you do and what you think. And the number told us it is only ever a man reaching for God and falling short, 666, not quite, tripled. The beast from the earth is not the loud monster on the horizon, it is the quiet one at your feet, and it has your worship in mind. So here is the thing worth carrying out of this. Everyone is watching the sea. And the beast the Bible actually warns you about comes up out of the ground you trust, wearing the face you love, speaking the language of everything you hold sacred, and asks you, gently, to bow. If you have ever wondered how good people, careful people, religious people get swept into worshipping something monstrous, this chapter has been answering that the entire time. It never looked like a dragon. It had two little horns like a lamb, and the only way anyone ever caught it was by stopping long enough to listen to the voice. That is the whole reason this channel exists. To open the book back up and read what is actually on the page, even when the truth turns out to be stranger or heavier or closer to your own life than the version we were handed. If this changed how you see even one chapter, subscribe, because we left the bigger monster standing. We spent tonight on the second beast, the one from the earth, but the first beast, the seven-headed thing from the sea that the whole world worships, has its own secret hiding in those seven heads. And there is a woman in a later chapter who rides it, drunk and covered in gold, whose name is a mystery the text dares you to solve. That video is on screen right now. I think you will want to know who she is.